This podcast is brought to you by Most Valuable Podcasts, leading the league in podcasting entertainment.
What's up, everybody? Ricky Widmer here, along with Sean Anderson.
Dub them.
And you might be thinking to yourself, well, Ricky, this is the Onside Kick on Most Valuable Podcast. Why is Sean here? Where is Mark Weber?
We fired him.
No.
Dub them.
We couldn't fire Mark.
You
Mark had to work.
We fired him. There's a E in we, and there's a E in fired.
So we dubbed them E's.
We dubbed them E's out of here. He's gone.
Well, apparently.
Bye, Mark.
Apparently, Mark's not as good as the Mark with two B's, as Riley said in his roast video. But Sean's here for the Onside Kick because Mark had to work. The day job will now come becoming the night job. You get it. But we're going to be talking some football topics. We got 4 lined up for you. Going to be talking Rams, firing Jeff Fisher. Going to be looking at Dak Prescott and Tony Romo. Who should be starting there?
Why are you looking at me like that?
Then we have the Lions, and then the NFL draft, and the Browns apparently have an astronomical grade on Myles Garrett coming out of Texas A&M. But we're going to start in Los Angeles, a very sunny city. I wish it was sunny here in Chicago. It's not. It's very cold. But
freezing.
The Rams went ahead yesterday, Sean, and they fired Jeff Fisher. He gone. We're going to be looking for a new coach. Plain and simple, where do the Rams go post Jeff Fisher?
Well, the Rams, first off, need to find an identity because right now they have a decent defense. There's a lot of pieces there that I do like that the Rams have, but really, so far, I mean, Los Angeles football has not been coming around. Los Angeles football has not really taken the hold yet, and I know it's only one season, so I'm not saying it's a project that's dead in the water already, but I'm just saying, so far, I mean, ratings aren't the best in Los Angeles. Stadium's not filling up. That has to go in with the team being bad. But really, Los Angeles is a slow starting team. But what they need to do is find an identity because you have a number 1 pick in Jared Goff, but obviously he hasn't been getting a lot of help. And I mean, people are kind of down on him in general. But he is still a rookie and he's not getting a lot of help because he doesn't have any weapons. You need to find an identity because you have a good player in Todd Gurley, but he's getting upset with the way that this offense is being run because it's like a 5th grade. Grade school out there is what he said. So what you need to do is develop an identity. Whether that's you're going to be a young team that's going to be very offensive heavy with a very open offense using Goff and Gurley, or you're going to be a defensive team like, say, the Panthers or the Seahawks. And I think you need to first off find your identity. Once you find your identity and the team, the owner and CEO and Kroenke, that fuck, he finds his identity of where he wants to take this team. Then you have to first off make sure that Les Snead is the right guy to be finding these players to fit your identity, and then you need to go with your coaches because we've seen that with the Rams here is they're trying to find their own identity in Los Angeles, and that has not been working yet. And they were struggling to find that in St. Louis as well, where they were struggling to find their identity. So first off, you need to find an identity for the Rams. Well,
the big thing that I'm taking away early on is, as we are a day after the firing, is today when Rams COO Kevin Durnoff talked about the firing.
Big Kev.
He mentioned that this isn't just like Jeff Fisher was not the only problem, that there are more problems within this organization. And I first heard that and I thought, okay, so that means Jeff Fisher's falling on the sword for the rest of you guys. Let's get the coach out of here to save the rest of our jobs. But it's exactly what you said. This Rams team needs to find an identity. And the worst thing that I think it can do is exactly what we're doing to it right now. When this job opened up, what was the first name that came out? Me and Brandon talked about it on the Primetime Podcast. Whose name was the first to come out?
Well, right away it was Harbaugh.
It was Jim Harbaugh.
Harbaugh was the first name that was thrown out because, and there was a report before he even got fired that Harbaugh would be interested, or they're actively seeking.
Very likely.
Yeah. That Harbaugh was interested in going to the Rams, which I first off don't want as a fan of college football and NFL football, where Harbaugh at Michigan feels right at least right now, and the way that he left San Francisco, I feel that where he currently is in Michigan's the right place, but also with that is I just feel like he's been there for too short of a time, where I feel like Harbaugh would at least honor his original contract and stay with his team than bolt right away after 2 years of being at Michigan. I feel like since that is such a prestigious place to be in. I feel like it's going to either take a prestigious job for Harbaugh to leave or his contract will have to be up.
Well, to me, the perfect job, and this is off topic a little bit, but the perfect job for him would be the Colts. Is if the Colts open up in a year or two after he's able to see that first freshman class through to see if they could win, then being able to go back and work with Andrew Luck in Indy could be pretty enticing. But with the Rams, like I was saying, I think they need to avoid the home run kind of a coach post Jeff Fisher. So that means I look at it and like Jim Harbaugh, a John Gruden, a Sean Payton. These are guys where it's like, don't focus on the big fish. Try to find the guy who's right for your job, even if he is a smaller fish, like a Jim Bob Cooter, like a Josh McDaniels, like a Kyle Shanahan. Those kind of players. I think that this Rams team, though, because of LA, is going to go, we need the big fish. And that's why we even heard reports that they wanted to entice Pete Carroll away from the Seahawks to go to the Rams. It's like, are you kidding me? Pete Carroll's not going to leave Seattle to go to the Rams in the division and go to a worse team.
The one thing you have to realize, though, is who is running the Los Angeles Rams, and that's Stan Kroenke. And Kroenke doesn't see this as a football team. He sees this as a business. That's the reason why he moved it from St. Louis. That's why he moved it from St. Louis to Los Angeles. That's why there was always reports that he wanted to move it. That's why he's building a huge stadium in Los Angeles to make it a business. It's not really about the on-field product. It's about making a business. But what he doesn't realize is that the on-field product needs to be good. And I think that, Stan Kroenke doesn't want to be putting out shit there, but what's making... what he is focusing more on is he making money? Because he is a guy that owns multiple franchises in multiple different leagues, and as long as he's making money, then he's a good businessman. That's all that he is really focused on. I mean, as long as Stan Kroenke can bring money to the Kroenke Sports Enterprises, then you're able to continue that going. I mean, he's a businessman. He's trying to increase his wealth, and as long as they're making money, that's all that matters to him. So I think with the one thing that he needs to realize is to make your business even more successful is that you need to find the right splash. Because you even look at the Colorado Avalanche, a team that he owns as well. When they were rebuilding, they got first rounder Nate McKinnon, and then they went out and got a coach in Patrick Waugh, who is a former goalie of the Avalanche, and they made a splash. And there was a quick spark with the Avalanche right away, where they had youthful energy, and Waugh looked like a great coach. And then they fell back because
this year they're not doing so hot.
Well, but he left a while ago. I mean, this was 2 years ago when he was hired. But really, what they do is they try to get a home run. They try to get a big name to entice fans to come back in, spend money, and then they'll just redo it, and they'll try to regroup and refocus. So what Kroenke needs to realize is he needs to find an identity for this team. I think the one identity you need to go towards is the defense, where you have a great defensive tackle in Aaron Donald. You have guys stepping up who, in Mark Barron, who was kind of an outcast at the Bucs and now has kind of found his position at this hybrid linebacker safety position. And also, you need to realize what you're going to do with your front office, because Les Snead, he's been with the team since 2012. And you look at his draft history, it hasn't been awful, to be frank. I mean, if you look at his first-round draft picks, Todd Gurley was a hit in his first season. And then, you have Aaron Donald in the first round in 2014, 2013, though, and this is where it kind of gets iffy, is they haven't been able to find guys deep, where in 2013 you draft Tavon Austin, number 8, you draft Ogletree, 30th, where that was a good pick. Ogletree's been a fantastic linebacker, but then you look at 2014, they get Greg Robinson, and Greg Robinson is now benched. He's a healthy scratch. I mean, Greg Robinson has been a terrible tackle, and he was really picked off of athleticism, but then you get Aaron Donald, so he's been able to make up for that. So the one thing that Les Snead hasn't been able to do is, one, bring in free agents at all. I mean, you name the last time the Los Angeles Rams had a big free agent signing. And then also, this draft, they get good players early in the first round, but they're able to get consistent picks deep and grow these players.
Well, and the free agent thing, I think being in LA, the more they're in LA, that's going to sort itself out, because it's also you have to win. That's number one. Of course, players want to play for teams that they think they can win with. But I think in time, people will say, well, I would rather play in L.A. more than when it was, I don't want to play in St. Louis.
But one thing, though, is it's with the NFL and L.A., this isn't like the NBA in LA. This isn't like the MLB in LA. This is a different.
They got to take over the town.
They have to take over the town, but I mean, LA is not a football market. I mean, I think we've seen that previously. I mean, you've looked at this LA market, and there's not that much to live off of. There's not that much, at least football-wise. I mean, USC has even fallen back since there hasn't been that great of a product since Matt Leinart and Reggie Bush left.
Like this year, even they did better than the Rams.
On the field wise, but even like they're on, like when that Notre Dame USC game was pretty much dead empty. I mean, like teams struggle in LA football wise, and unless you bring and find your identity, it's going to be hard to bring fans in. It's going to be hard to fill up that new stadium. So I think you need to find your identity, and I think that's going to first off either depend on if you're going to keep Les Snead or not, and then it's going to go into coaching. And I think we should probably transition to coaching.
Well,
right?
That's what I was doing, and to me, with this team, if I'm going out and I am targeting a coach, I'm taking every single defensive coordinator and throwing them out the window. I am not looking at a defensive coach. The reason being is if I'm looking at both sides of the football, the defense is the most strongest side. And I would feel more confident in bringing in an offensive-minded head coach who could rebuild this offense to what he wants and then just bring in a guy defensively that he trusts to run the defense. And the two offensive coordinators, I know people are going to throw out Josh McDaniels. I know that Kyle Shanahan's name. I got two guys that I think that these are kind of like below the radar kind of guys, but I think they could fit with this team. The first one is Darrell Bevell, the offensive coordinator with the Seahawks. Why not get a guy who knows the division, who has been on a team that's successful? The only difference is
he's not that good of an offensive coordinator.
The only difference is Russell Wilson. Is working with Russell Wilson in that offense going to be similar to working with what the Rams have? No. And that's the only reason why I think he'd be like, it's one of those ones where it's unless like a McDaniel says no, a Kyle Shanahan says no, I don't think he'd be the guy. The one that I think could be one that we look at is Harold Goodwin, the offensive coordinator from the Cardinals, because you have a strong-arm quarterback, well, smarter than Goff, but a quarterback in Palmer that he worked with. You have Todd Gurley to work with. He had David Johnson with the Cardinals. The only thing he needs to get for the Rams is some wide receivers like Larry Fitzgerald.
See, with one thing, though, with Bevell, I mean, you've seen previously that, guys like, I mean, obviously you can go directly to the Super Bowl loss where he calls on 3rd and goal. He calls a pass to he calls a slant route on the.
Is that him or Pete Carroll?
That was Bevell on the 2-yard line, and that's why Marshawn Lynch blows up and says, "What is Bevell doing?" I mean, you see that. I mean, I look at Darrell Bevell and I kind of look at their offense is lackluster, and I mean they thrive so much off of strong runners and Marshawn Lynch and Russell Wilson. I don't think he's really thriving because of Bevell. I think he's just thriving because he's a good quarterback, and you also have a coach like Pete Carroll who is so offensive minded. I think that's why when people were looking at head coaching jobs, at least when the Falcons were, they weren't looking at Bevell. They were looking at Quinn, the coach of Dan Quinn of the Falcons. Sorry, Dan Quinn of the Falcons, because he really built that defense. He was brought in to help that defense grow. And I look at a guy like Bevell, and I think that's I think that's too much of a stretch because I mean there's constant stuff coming out where it's he's not that good of a offensive coordinator. You see that there's some shaky play calls, and then also I mean there's players of him kind of calling him out multiple times. And then the guy. The other guy that you brought up with Goodwin, I mean, Bruce Arians is a very heavy offensive-minded coach. So when you look at those guys, I understand you're saying keep it in the division, but I don't think those guys are living off of their success. I think they're living off of being behind great head coaches in Bruce Arians and Pete Carroll. And obviously you want to say, well, you have to give these guys chances, but I still look at that and say I'm not entirely sure about those guys. The guys, and when you say, you have a strong defense, you have to go away from defense. I think that's where the identity kind of comes in, where if you do want to keep, the idea of we want a strong defense, and then we have two guys on offense and we need to draft guys around them, and being in Goff and Gurley, if you want to bring in a defensive-minded head coach, guys that you brought up was the defensive coordinator for the Panthers in Sean McDonough. Young guy.
He's an interesting one, though.
And again, he might be, Ron Rivera, former defensive coordinator for the Bears. He kind of might be living off of Rivera's success as well.
I'm not saying he's living off of his success. The thing why I say McDermott's a interesting
I'm sorry.
one.
I said Sean McDermott.
Yeah,
the play-by-play notes for ESPN.
Why McDermott is an interesting one is because to me, I feel like the head coaching vacancy that probably won't open up, but that would be perfect for him, would be the Bears. I just think he would, like, if John Fox did get fired, I think he would be the one. Ron Rivera defense going back there. With the Rams, could it work? Yes. It's just a thing of, do I want to go with a defensive coach? And then it's like, great, our offense is already so terrible, and our head coach is a defensive guy.
I think for me, at least coaching-wise, I think 4 guys stick out for me. And those names are 2 guys that you've said previously, but you wanted away. Shanahan and McDaniels. I think with McDaniels, though, it's a guy that you have to make sure that offense is your identity, and you need to go towards that, because with McDaniels, he was coming into a Broncos team that did not have that many high expectations. He started off quick, and people said, oh, he's great. He's fantastic. He's going to lead them to Super Bowl. Josh McDaniels was the heir apparent to Bill Belichick, and this got blown out of the water where they were just having really good success early, and then McDaniels' flaws as a head coach kind of came up, but still he went back to New England, has been progressing fantastically as an offensive coordinator, and might be in that Lane Kiffin era where he was really thriving under guys like Pete Carroll and Bill Belichick, and he had great players around him, and then we really don't know if he can translate that success to a head coaching job.
This. If you bring in McDaniels and make him the head coach, you must fire Les Snead. That's what you need to do, because with McDaniels, you need to build an organization that is actually going to support him. If he's got to do it all on his own, it's just going to be Denver 2.0. That's what it's going to be with him. But what were the other 2 besides Shanahan and McDaniels that you had?
Yeah, I don't disagree with that either. I mean, McDaniels can't be out on an island. He needs to be able to, worry about coaching, and he can't be worrying about player personnel that's going to fit his offense. He's got to take what he's given and then just be a coach, because when you look at New England, I believe that he's at least counseled by Bill Belichick, but Bill Belichick's going to do what he wants, and Bill Belichick's going to do what he thinks is best for the team. So I don't think McDaniels has that much of say in personnel. So you have to let the front office and the head coaching segments be different here, and I think that Kyle Shanahan is another interesting option, because this Falcons offense has been fantastic under Shanahan, and I think that he's interesting just because of obviously the pedigree that he has with his father obviously being a great head coach in the NFL. In Mike Shanahan. So I think Kyle is an interesting one because he is young. He has the offensive mind that you do want. The one thing that I do question is how well can he help a quarterback grow, because he was given Matt Ryan. He was given a great quarterback already. Matt Ryan was already a veteran when he took over in 2015. So how is he going to be able to do, developing a quarterback? And that's one thing that I want to say.
With the Redskins, he had RG3.
But RG3 got injured.
But
that's not Kyle Shanahan's fault. That's more of RG3 got injured. And then you look at, when he was in Houston, he didn't have a young quarterback there. So he's really never worked with young quarterbacks. I mean, in Houston, he worked with David Carr, but David Carr didn't turn out to that much, but that was because David Carr is just talent, and then he worked with Matt Schaub. So I look at that, and I kind of say, how is he going to work with a young quarterback? So that's why Josh McDaniels and Kyle Shanahan kind of worry me a bit, because they haven't worked with young quarterbacks. I mean, Kyle Shanahan has worked with Tom Brady, so it's tough to say he's a good molder of young minds. Two guys that we haven't mentioned, though, that I want to bring up. Vic Fangio, the current defensive coordinator for the Bears,
who will probably be out of a job.
Might be. We don't know with the weird situation there, because there's been rumors that he might be out, that him and John Fox don't get along, but he's been doing a fantastic job helping this Bears defense grow to a top 15 defense in the league, at least statistically, and out there they've been playing well lately. So I look at a guy like Vic Fangio, who's worked under Jim Harbaugh when he was in San Francisco, knows the division a little bit. He knows the coaches in Arians and Pete Carroll. So I look at that, and I think that you'll be able to understand the division. Vic Fangio is also a defensive-minded coach where he can help this Rams defense grow. You're giving him an already great defense, so at least for the first year, you can continue to have this great defense. And then if you bring in an offensive-minded coordinator, and you kind of did what the Bears did, where they go heavy with John Fox as your head coach. So you bring in a guy like Vic Fangio, and then you bring in a offensive coordinator to take like Adam Gase to take over the offense solely. And I don't know exactly who that would be, but if you can bring in a guy who knows offense so well, and a guy like Josh McDaniels, a guy like Adam Gase who can really mold an offense, that's going to be how Vic Fangio thrives as a head coach. And another guy that I want to bring up, and the final guy I'll bring up, is Todd Haley. Former head coach of the Kansas City Chiefs. He went to the playoffs with the Chiefs in 2010, and he is the current offensive coordinator with the Steelers. He's been working with Big Ben, so he really hasn't been able to develop a young quarterback. He had Matt Castle back in Kansas City, who was kind of young, but I mean, Matt Castle was working with Belichick for most of the time, and that was mainly because Scott Pioli used to work for the Patriots in their front office, and he brought in Castle. So I look at a guy like Todd Haley, who had one season true where he was able to go through a season, and then the third season he got fired, and the first season was iffy just because he was able to he was stepping into a kind of an unknown. So I think that Todd Haley could be interesting just because the Steelers' offense has been so dynamic, and that's a lot to say with Le'Veon Bell and Antonio Brown and Ben Roethlisberger. But I think that the guys that I'm throwing out, Vic Fangio, Todd Haley, Kyle Shanahan, and Josh McDaniels, I think that with this Rams team, you need someone with at least head coaching experience or has spent time in this division or has extensive time as a coordinator.
The last thing I'm going to say to kind of round this up is the Todd Haley one's interesting to me because it's one of those things where you look at it and it's like, okay, his tenure with the Chiefs didn't end too well. Yes, he's had success in Pittsburgh, but like you said, he's been working with Big Ben, and is Jared Goff really on the level of Big Ben? To me, I think that... That was a question that obviously it's no.
Oh, yeah.
Threw it out there.
It's just a funny question to think of.
It's one of those ones where it's like, obviously, Jared Goff, because obviously there's some analysts out there that believe that the Rams might have whiffed on the Jared Goff pick because he didn't start day one and you really knew what he was getting, and that players know that he's not really that good. But to kind of put an end to this, the last thing I wanted to say is any of the big names, and when I say big names like Shaw at Stanford, Jim Harbaugh, Sean Payton, John Gruden, I don't think we're going to hear those names. I don't think we get a big name. When they hire a coach, I don't think we get a big name. I mean, there could be a chance that like a Rex Ryan gets fired and then they bring on a Rex Ryan, but right now, I think we don't get a big name. I think Jim Harbaugh stays at Michigan. I think Shaw stays at Stanford. There's your two college guys staying. John Gruden is interesting to me, because I know there's a number. Colin Cowherd said it's $8 million that he would come back and
we don't know how
coach.
much Cowherd knows about that, though.
Just
throwing it out there. We don't know exactly.
I'm just saying, like, I think that John Gruden would be, if they were able to bring him in, he would be a great hire for that team and would be able to turn them around. And if they hired John Gruden, if I was a Rams fan, I'd be super excited for it.
I disagree.
I just don't know if it's going to happen. And then, like, Sean Payton, it's one of those things where is he going to leave New Orleans? Is he going to stay in New Orleans? I don't think he leaves. Right now, I can't say that he leaves New Orleans. So any of the big-name guys, I don't think it's going to be any of them. We're going to get a coordinator that comes out, even if it's like a Josh McDaniels or a Jimmy Schwartz, who were once head coaches, coordinators this year, and then come back to the fraternity.
I think it's going to be interesting. I think we'll know more towards the end of the season. I think Gruden would be a complete mistake because he's just been out of actual coaching so long. And you say that he's kind of been a coach from the booth, but that's different than actually being a coach. That's different from actually working.
He's one of those guys, though, that he's good. He's one of those guys where no matter how long he's been out, he can still coach guys.
We'll see, but I mean he's been out of the league for 8 years. I mean the last time he worked with a team was 2008. You went 9-7, and you look at that roster. He was working with Jeff Garcia, Brian Griese, Luke McCown, and Josh Johnson as his quarterbacks.
You just had a name pop into my head. Tom Coughlin. Do they contact Tom Coughlin?
I think Coughlin would be an interesting one. And obviously Coughlin had, I think there was some, I forget when there was a team brought up that he would be interested, because there was this year he was rumored for some job, and I knew he talked to the Eagles after he was fired, but something with Coughlin, I think it'd be an interesting one, but I mean he does currently have a job right now with the NFL. I don't know. It'd be interesting, but I don't think Coughlin would be the right move, and he did pretty much bring a team in the Jaguars, who were a brand new team, to the AFC Championship game in a second year, but that wasn't a team full of rookies. And he did have Eli in his first year, and he was able to help Eli grow, so that might be an interesting name. But I think that it's not going to be Tom Coughlin. I don't think it's going to be John Gruden, or if it is John Gruden, I think they're making a mistake just because he's been out of the game for so long. I mean, he was a great head coach, but 8 years is a long way to be out of the game. I think that, Harbaugh is definitely not going to be there. I think David Shaw would be the wrong choice here because, I haven't been super impressed with what he's done at Stanford.
I just don't think he leaves Stanford.
And he's had a great running back in Christian McCaffrey. So I don't think he's really had that much success of his own. I want to see how he can do with his own players that he's brought in. I think it's going to be interesting to see who emerges because right now I don't know who emerges as the head coaching candidate or as the top head coaching candidate. So it's going to be interesting. And then just final, player-wise that they need to do, they definitely need wide receiver help because they don't have a good wide receiver on that team. And you can defend Kenny Britt. Kenny Britt isn't a good wide receiver. Neither is Brian Quick. Tavon Austin is a bust. He's very quick, but I think he's best as a return man, and he's not that good at that. You obviously need O-line help. Your last big top pick was Greg Robinson. You now have him as a scratch. So I think this defense is fine. Obviously, you can always improve, but I think it's interesting there. But I think that the Rams are in a very interesting situation, and if they fuck this up, it is going to be very bad for the Cronkies.
Funny that you say that. I first thought there are some great wide receivers that you could get in the first round. Oh, wait, you don't have your pick because you gave it to the Titans.
Alshon Jeffrey?
Kind of, they could go after Alshon Jeffrey, but does Alshon Jeffrey want to go to a team like the Rams? That would be the question.
He might like money, though, if they give him enough.
Money does talk. That's what they say. But this is where you guys come in down below. Let us know. What do you guys think? Where do the Rams go post Jeff Fisher? Do they fire Les Snead? Do they clear house? What coaches would you look for? Ram fans, we want to hear from you.
I say clear house, and you bring in a guy like Josh McDaniels. I want to see what he can do again. I'm not being sold on the Josh McDaniels. That's the guy I go for. Neither am I. I'm not sold on anyone.
But I do agree with you. You got to clear house.